Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good whatever time of day it is, wherever you are right now. Thank you for tuning into the Conversations with Dr. Don show. The show is produced and broadcast from the Portland, Oregon area. For your first-time viewers, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of one-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals and about what we've decided to talk about tonight. And we're going to be talking about tonight Alan Zundel of Social Advance. Alan Zundel of Social Advance. And here is Alan Zundel.
Hello, Dr. Don.
How are you?
I'm good. It's good to see you again.
You're feeling good?
Yeah, I'm feeling pretty good.
I wish I was feeling as good as you are.
Do I not look well?
Yes. So let's start with the Who Are You segment here. Each Conversations with Dr. Don show consists of two major segments. In the first segment, the Who Are You segment, I talk with my guests a little about who they are personally so that we might get a bit of an appreciation of why they say what they say. In the second segment, we'll talk about Alan Zundel of Social Advance. Social Advance, I love that wording here, all right? Okay, they've heard my bio stuff for so many years, so many times, so I won't say it over and over again. So let's start with you. You ready?
Oh, yeah.
If I ask your best friend, who is Alan? What would your best friend say? Be your best friend. Alan is...
I have so many friends, I have to pick who would be this.
Well, pick one of them.
Pick one of them, okay.
A good friend.
Yeah, I'd probably say Alan is a dedicated individual who's trying to make the world a better place.
Mm-hmm.
I hope he'd say that.
Does he believe that?
Probably not.
Let's quit. Yeah. All right. And where and when were you born?
Where and when? I was born in Detroit, Michigan, back in 1952.
That's a while back, huh?
Yeah.
You ready for your trick question? I got one or two of those.
All right. Do I win a prize if I get it right?
No. Why were you born?
Why? My parents weren't careful.
It's bad. It's really starting out bad here. Anything significant to the viewers about your racial, national, or cultural heritage, Alan? Anything come to mind?
Well,
that people be curious about.
Gee, I don't know. A lot of my ancestors, of course, were immigrants to the United States, as most people are, especially white people. I think one of the significant things is that my grandfather was from Ireland. He's the one that's most recently came over to the United States. So there's still, within my family growing up, there was still that sense that we came here from elsewhere to do better.
Yeah.
And that was important to him.
What's the name Zundel come? Where does it come from?
It's Germanic.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. No, my grandfather was on my mother's side. His name was Walsh.
Any religious preference?
Right now?
Yeah.
Well, I try to appreciate the good things in all religions, but I was mostly raised, and for much of my life was Roman Catholic.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
You see this
Mea culpa.
Too many. Yeah, I was an altar boy for years.
But I've been immersed in Buddhism for a long time too. I've had a long-standing meditation practice.
I've dabbled in Buddhism, and I've heard a few people, Buddhists, say, I've known you a little bit now, and it seems like there's something about you that's rather Buddhistic or something, And that's,
oh, yeah?
Thank you very much.
That's a good thing. Yeah.
Now, let's talk a little about your education. You've got a bunch of that.
Yeah, too much.
Yeah. Tell me about your education. Where'd you go to school like that?
You mean college, or like
wherever you want to start?
Back? I went to a Catholic school when I was a grade school, but and just outside of Detroit where I grew up, and then I went off to college, and after 3 months I quit. And for 10 years I didn't go to school. I went back to school when I was 27 or so, 28 maybe, 28.
Sort of like me.
Yeah.
I dropped out.
And then I finished my bachelor's degree, actually did in religious studies, history of religion. And after that, I got more interested in social justice during that period of time. and switched to political science. So I did a master's degree and then a PhD in political science and taught for about 10 years before I left academia.
So what do you mean by social justice? That's a word that's thrown around a lot by people. People don't even know what it means. Right?
Yeah, well, people have to fill in the blanks of what that means. Justice means things being right. And so social justice is making society right, making it what it should be for all people.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
What should it be?
Well, it should be something that where people feel taken care of by each other. I think that's a human thing to do. And when people are not doing that, there's something wrong.
Yeah. And boy, yeah.
I did go back to college again much later.
Okay.
And got a degree in mental health counseling, so I had a little experience with that.
Okay. Are you Freudian or what?
No. No. I actually brought a lot of my Buddhist practice into that. Yeah.
How long have you been dabbling in Buddhism or being involved in Buddhism?
Oh, geez. Back in the 80s maybe, or probably read about it in the 70s. I started practicing meditation when I was like 22, so that was 74. And then, looking into different religious traditions was the thing to do in the 1970s, right? That's what most of us were trying to do, figure ourselves out, because the world was going crazy, so you wanted to at least find some kind of inner peace.
Yes.
But those two things go together, I think,
Sure.
finding yourself and finding your place in the world.
Are you still meditating?
Not at the moment, but I did earlier today.
It's going to be one of those times. Yeah, so your bio I have written here, there's so many things that I should talk about anyhow, but you're in the Secretary of State in 2016, you're a candidate of the Pacific Green Party. You've been active in promoting a new method of voting, star voting. You would talk about star voting, will you?
No, I was here with you back in 2016 when I was running for Secretary of State as the Green Party candidate.
Yes.
I was talking about ranked choice voting at the time.
Ranked choice.
Which is similar, but star voting is a more recent innovation that's an improvement of ranked choice voting, actually.
Oh, I want to hear about that. Yeah.
So I came across that after I lost the election. I'm not Secretary of State. And came across that the next year through Mark Frohnmeyer, who lives in Eugene as well. His father ran for governor years ago, and he lost in a spoiler election. And so he's looking for things that would deal with the spoiler problem, and realized there's problems with ranked choice voting. And in a conversation, they developed the germ of the idea of star voting. So yeah, I've been working on that for the last 3 years too.
Mm-hmm. Can you say a little more about star voting right now?
Sure. It's a system where the voter, instead of just picking one candidate, you can give a score to any of the candidates you want.
Yes.
So it's 0 to 5. The ones you like a lot, you give a 5. The one you don't like at all, you give a 0.
Uh-huh.
Okay? And you can, if you ignore them, they get a 0. It means you don't know enough about them to even, care whether they win or not. And you can give two people the same score if you like them equally. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of advantages. And then when they count the votes, it's a simple 2-step process. The first thing they do is add up the scores from the ballots for each candidate. So say you get a 5, you get a 4, you get a 3, you get a 5. They take all the ballots, look at your scores, add them up, and you get a total score, right?
Mm-hmm.
The two candidates who got the highest scores then go to the next round.
Sort of like a ranked choice.
Sort of like a ranked choice, but there's only one round. You don't have to go through the multiple rounds and waiting for the result. It's very simple. In the second round, whichever candidate got a higher rank on the most ballots wins.
Mm-hmm.
So this ballot, you got a 4, I got a 3, that goes to you. This ballot, I got a 2, you got a 0, that goes to me. So it's one person, one vote, or one ballot, one vote. Whichever candidate got the higher score on that ballot, it goes for them. So first round, the two who got the highest scores. Second round, which of those two was liked by the most voters, according to the way they scored them on their ballot.
Mm-hmm. How is that progressing now in the legislature?
We had a couple, we tried to get it instituted in Lane County down there for the county elections. We got it on the ballot, and there was a election, but it didn't pass. It was relatively close, but we didn't have the resources to reach all across the county. But it did very well in the city of Eugene. So this year, it looks like we're going to have it in the ballot in Eugene for the city council and mayor's races. And we're hoping that it passes this time. We're prepared to do what it takes to get it there.
Do you think the legislators are going to endorse that?
There are some legislators who are interested in it. In fact, two of the candidates who are now running for Secretary of State, two of the Democrats, have expressed interest in it. Jamie Skinner McLeod and Mark Hess have both said that they want to look into that as secretary.
What are you doing now to earn your keep? You don't work anymore, do you? You've been retired for some time.
Well, I do the housework and shopping and cooking. My wife, who's a few years younger than me, she works full time. She likes being a nurse. She's not ready to stop yet, but she's getting close.
She's still nursing, huh?
Yeah.
Does she love you?
Last time I checked.
Yeah. Do you have any children?
Oh, we have two grown children, yeah, and two grandchildren.
Oh, you're getting old, aren't you?
It feels like it. But then I look at you and I feel young.
Thanks. Do you have any pets?
Not at home. We used to have a dog when the kids were little.
Do you like dogs?
They're okay. I don't like taking care of pets. My wife would like to have a dog, but she's gone out work all day. I'd be the one walking and cleaning up after her.
I didn't bother to ask you about your political persuasion.
Well, you did last time.
I know. Because I smell you from last time, yeah.
Tried to flush me out.
What's the difference between sympathy and empathy?
Oh, you asked me that last time.
Oh, boy, you got a good memory, don't you?
I rewatched part of the show.
Memberships in political, social, or civic organizations that are worth mentioning for the viewers.
Well, I recently re-registered with the Democratic Party. I haven't been with the Green Party for a few years. Was a non-affiliated voter for the in-between. And Social Advance is the other thing I'm involved in, besides the Star Voting Group, Equal Vote Coalition promoting star voting. I've helped that get set up, and now I've taken a back seat in that a little bit.
It seems there's something amiss in America because there's only two political parties.
I agree.
What are you going to do about it?
Well, that's the whole purpose of Social Advance was to try to find a way to get around the limitations of the two-party system.
Get around it.
Get around it because when I got politically active, and this was years ago, you start to realize that you're in a dilemma if you don't exactly fit the mold of one of the major parties.
Yeah.
And that's an awful lot of people.
Even Bernie Sanders has had to endorse the Democratic Party. Huh?
Yeah. So in the Democratic Party, because it's so big, your voice gets lost in the crowd. It tends to move toward the center to try to accommodate as many people as possible. And in a two-party system, two big parties, it's susceptible to the influence of money because to run a campaign as a big party, you got to collect a lot of money. Now, in European countries where they have parliamentary systems, you can take a small party and grow it if the voters respond to your message. Right? So there's an opportunity for a circulation of ideas and for new parties to emerge. But in a two-party system, it gets kind of stagnant and inertia sets in. And the parties find it hard to move away from the direction they've been in a long time. And the pressures build up because people feel like their problems are not being addressed adequately. And then you have some kind of big rupture, which happened recently in the Republican Party with Trump's election. The party has completely been altered with Trump's election.
It is Trump's party now? It is the Republican Party?
It certainly seems that way at the national level, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So anyway, Social Advance came from that frustration with the Democratic Party, and then the Green Party and other parties, they're marginalized by the election system, so they can't make much headway and they can't have a lot of effect. The best they can do is, be an alternative to give people a chance to, spread their wings politically and electorally and have a different message out there. But it's very difficult for them to win partisan elections just because of the election system. So one way is to change the election system, which takes a long time. The social advance concept was to create an organization that develops resources like a political party, but it doesn't seek a ballot line, so it doesn't have to get stuck in the box of being a minor party or a major party. You can collect voters' names, you can run a political action committee, you can do endorsements, but you can pick anyone from any party or an independent, whoever best represents your particular group's values.
Mm.
So that was a general concept and a way to approach things differently.
What is the difference between sympathy and empathy?
Well, I told you last time, you don't remember?
No.
Sympathy, I think, is when you're observing somebody's state and you kind of feel bad for them. You feel for them. Mm-hmm. But empathy is more realizing how they're feeling, being able to put yourself in their shoes, mm-hmm. being able to actually draw out a chord of connection in what they're experiencing, and not just what they're feeling, but why they're experiencing it.
Yeah, and your juices and all that sort of stuff that goes on inside of the human animal come to fore, and you can say, oh, look how his eyes are wet right now. That means there's something more going on than something cerebral.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just the difference between me saying, oh, I can see you're upset, and me saying, wow, I really know what that feels like. I can,
And I like it's conveyed more by an expression or how you're showing it, mm-hmm. how you're letting your body show what's really going on, mm-hmm. rather than articulating it, using your vocal cords to do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I can tell right now you're very empathetic to me. I'm very nervous. Okay, memberships in political, social, or civic organizations, any of those that you're still involved with?
Well, the Democratic Party, I've become a precinct committee person. Mm-hmm. That's partially because the Bernie Sanders movement within the Democratic Party is encouraging to me, and so I'm willing to help them move forward in whatever way I can.
Okay, I'm tempted to ask you now about the candidates in the Democratic Party and the likelihood of one of those succeeding in beating Trump.
I'm out of the prophecy business after 2016. It's really hard to tell. I think it looks like Bernie and Biden have the best chance, but things change so fast. Who knows these days?
But the corporate media is still listening to and spreading the word according to Trump's tweets.
Well, they got their own narratives and their own set of interests, and it's not necessarily for the public's edification. It's more for, getting a lot of people to watch.
Yeah.
And Trump is entertaining, sometimes in a very scary way.
What's he doing good?
What's he doing good?
What does doing good mean?
Or what's doing good?
Doing good, yeah.
Doing good.
Mama used to always say to me, boy, do good.
Do good.
Yeah.
And be well. Doing good means, I think it's really moving from your open heart. To have a connection of love and compassion for others is when you do good in the world. Something moves through you, something bigger than yourself.
Bigger than yourself.
Bigger than yourself, or you might say the biggest part of yourself, or where you're connected to the larger universe, or to whatever you regard as a supreme being or God or the energy of the universe. But it's allowing that to flow through an open heart. That's what I would say. We're getting very mystical now, rather than my political views. There's two sides of me. It's hard to bring those together because people want to either focus on spiritual growth and personal spirituality and changing the world through who you are, or being active politically. But I think both of those have to come together.
What do you mean by spiritual?
It's a word that's tossed around. It generally means that sense of somehow I'm growing and becoming more connected, becoming more in touch with something deeper in life, and also you can sense, yourself changing, having more maybe wisdom, compassion, more strength of purpose, moral strength.
What have you found in becoming enamored of Buddhism? What do you find in that other than staying a Roman Catholic?
Well, I went back to being a Roman Catholic at one point.
Did you really?
Yeah, I did.
I never did go back.
But the Roman Catholics, they had a strong tradition of mysticism and meditation, which I didn't hear too much about when I was a kid. But when I was older, I took up meditation. Well, the full story is I had an LSD trip when I was a young man.
Did you?
Yes. And I felt like I went through a death experience, through the tunnel and all that, and saw the light in the distance. And I just wanted to go home to that light. And a voice finally
Were you
said,
mentally, ill at that time, or what?
Well,
Or just the LSD was the...
The LSD was enough. I think we're all mentally ill to some degree. So anyway, and I felt there's this light, and it was a loving presence. It was home. I wanted to go to it, and a voice said, "You're not ready yet." And I came down. And I wasn't religious at that point, or spiritual in any way, really. But it left a mark on me. And then when I started meditation and started learning about spirituality, it was like, wow, this sounds like it may help me move towards that, what I was seeking. I felt like there's something missing in my life, and I wanted to find out what that was.
Did you find out?
Well, I'll let others be the judge of that. I feel content with where I'm at and what I'm doing. I'd say it that way. I feel like I have purpose.
Purpose. Is that purpose something like doing good?
Yeah, it is, yeah. I think for most of us, finding who we are leads us to a life of service in some form.
How often do you meditate nowadays, the Buddhist fashion?
Well, I meditate about once a day in the morning for about a half an hour, unless I get busy in the morning and then forget.
Yeah. This is a personal interrogation.
Yeah, it's going in a different direction than I thought it was going to.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was the meditation practice that got me interested in Buddhism. And then I was looking for, a tradition to give some structure to my spiritual practice. And I came to a point where just the whole symbiology of Christianity meant something to me. So I immersed myself in that for a long time, but then became dissatisfied with that as well. Actually, when I went to school to study religious studies, I wanted to be a biblical scholar. And I started to recognize that the theme of social justice was very prominent in the Bible. Mm-hmm. So I asked myself the question, well, what do you want to do? Just study the book, or you want to live what they're telling you? And that's when I switched over to political science.
Which part of the Bible were you talking about now? The Old Testament?
There's a lot of parts in there, aren't there? No, it's a consistent theme in the prophets. And then it's in the story of Moses as well, leading the slaves out of slavery. And then Jesus continually talks about that in a way that people don't always recognize, but it's there.
Are you a Jesus freak?
There's still Jesus freaks around. I don't think so.
I'm disclosing my age.
No, I think Christianity, it has so many forms. It's hard to know what's true and what's not true. So I'm not too immersed in that anymore. Whether Jesus was the Son of God, whether even historically actually existed, it's more the message and the meaning that's behind it all that's important to me. The rest of it is not as prominent in my life.
Who were
right
your
now.
heroes growing up? Even later on, you probably had one or two heroes left over from childhood.
From childhood, boy, that's an odd thing. Is I wanted to be a comedian, and my hero
You're
was,
getting better at it too.
my hero was Charlie Chaplin.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Really?
yeah, because I read about him and how great he was, and how much he advanced the art of motion picture, and what a good comedian he was, and all that. But back in those days, you couldn't just get on the internet and look up his movies. But then I saw some of his movies, and that really took me like, wow, this guy really has made this into an art form. And I learned about him, saw that he started his own studio, he wrote, directed his own pictures. So he was a very impressive person. I think he was also a socialist.
Figures. Who else besides Charles Chaplin that you
Well, that was when I was
looked
young.
up to, looked up,
Well, yeah.
worshipped or something?
Worship? No, I wouldn't say that. I think Martin Luther King and Gandhi were influences in my political sense of how I wanted to proceed in the world, the message of nonviolence, but also commitment and practical methods of making things happen. Not just sitting back to wait for it to happen. You got to get out there and make something happen.
How many times have you seen Gandhi? the
person?
movie.
I think he died before I was born. I saw it. Well, I saw it once for sure when it first came to the movie. I think I saw it again on videotape, probably not DVD. I keep looking for it at the library, but it's always checked out. So apparently, it's a popular movie, even though it's 3 hours long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I must have seen it 6 times.
Did you?
This is probably as many times as I've seen Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, those episodes. Yeah, so let's take a break and then put up a couple of announcements, and then we'll turn the mic off, and then we'll come back and go into the second. All right, we are back again. So I need to tell you about what you're looking at, because some of you have tuned into the show quite by accident. And for you viewers who just tuned in, you missed the opening of the show. Conversations with Dr. Don that you're watching is an ongoing series of 1-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like Alan Zundel again, about who he is as a unique, one-of-a-kind individual, and he is, and about what we've decided to talk about tonight. We're talking about Alan Zundel of Social Advance and about Social Advance. So let's talk about that. So you sent me a couple of prompting questions so that we can have something to go on, and I had a couple of questions of my own. And I've got some stuff I downloaded about Social Advance, so I will quiz you about what I've gotten in writing to be sure that you're honest through the years. So what is Social Advance? Tell me again.
Well, it's an organization that's focused on electoral politics, and we've got a set of guiding principles that we want to implement by we're doing several things. Right now, what we focused on the last year was creating a online news show about Oregon politics. And the idea was to help people who are interested in it to better understand what's going on in Salem and across the state in terms of political activity, like the upcoming primaries or what happened in the legislature when it's in session, or protests, things that are going on, and occasionally try to explain the background of it and give them some more information. So we're building a platform for people who are interested in Oregon politics. And then we also want to do things like endorsing candidates who align with our principles, and eventually building up a membership that can do even more. So it's kind of does some of the functions of a political party. We have a set of values. We want to help people get elected. But we're not going to seek a ballot line, because I think that just gets you stuck in a box. People always have to choose a party, and then there's a minor party, a major party. Each one comes with its own set of problems. So we decided to kind of straddle that by doing an organization open to people from any party or no party.
So you're addressing those kinds of important issues on a state level or a local level. Hopefully it'll catch on here and then move to California, other left coast.
Keep going,
thing.
yeah. Well,
And
maybe.
maybe at a national level, but we've got to have something to break out of this cycle of American hegemony or something. And so I wonder if there's another approach besides Bernie Sanders and democratic socialism. I am a democratic socialist, and I was a communist until Joe Stalin came along and contaminated the entire thing.
Yes, that's a tragic story. If I were to label my views, I'd say I'm more of a libertarian socialist.
Libertarian socialist.
Yes, sounds contradictory, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
It means that I don't trust big business and I don't trust big government.
Who do you trust?
I trust people acting for their own well-being and that of their families. So that's our first principle is citizen empowerment. I think empowering ordinary people to understand the political world and give them some skills and support to be active in their world. I think people's heart is generally in the right place.
How do you get through the corporate media or the sources of information that imprint on people's minds so that their thinking is biased? For example, they think that wealth is the most important thing in the world rather than social responsibility.
Well, that comes from our capitalist structure of our society, right? I mean, we're constantly fed the message that building wealth is doing good for society, that you are actually serving people. You wouldn't be getting rich unless you were doing something people wanted, giving them something they needed, which is not true. If you look at it carefully.
You're saying that so as though you own it, you know.
Wealth
and health can be compatible. So we don't want to have those. Never mind.
I don't think it's wealth. I think it's very specific.
Agreed.
That we have business institutions, economic institutions, whose primary purpose by structure is to create profits for investors. And since
isn't that wealth?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, if you and I were able to build our wealth, that's good. But if you have a small class of investors that own almost all the investment capital, then you're just making them richer and richer and richer. That's not good for society. That's not good for people who get left out. And it's not good for the direction of the business institutions, because they start to seek out wealth even when it does things that are harmful to others.
Is that greed?
It could be greed, but I don't think it's personal.
Well, isn't it, in America today, isn't it dominant or behind the thrust for wealth?
Is greed?
Yeah.
I think it's institutional more than it's personal. You know, when you say greed, it makes it like a personal moral failing. But if you're an investor, you won't find an opportunity. It takes an awful lot of time and effort to find businesses that are ethically responsible and understand what they're doing. So people just generally, they give their money over to a fund. Like I have some investments in a retirement fund that built up where I wasn't paying attention to it.
You're a capitalist, yeah.
Yes, I am. I'm not living off of it, and I couldn't live off it alone, so I'm partially capitalist, I guess. But I don't think there's anything wrong with owning things. It's that our institutions try to take that and multiply it no matter what. Like right now, look what's happening with climate crisis. We're destroying the world that sustains us. We're destroying our habitable environment to create more profit for investors.
Who's the we are you talking about? What you just said, it's certain people who are interested
society.
in wealth, because wealth is a religion. Mm-hmm. It is a focus that overpowers or overcomes the need to take care of fellow citizens and fellow human beings.
Mm-hmm. We're all implicated.
Who's the we you're talking about now?
All of us.
I'm not.
Well, we get on airplanes, we drive cars. That all adds carbon to the atmosphere.
Notice I covered my mouth. Yeah, I busted myself.
Not me. It's institutional. It's a system, and it's hard to overcome for any individual. I mean, the people in power get into power because they conform with the system. So it's very difficult to change.
systems change.
They do, but it's hard to make them change in the way you'd like.
Boy, you sounds like you should belong to some of the European societies and cultures and some sort of socialism. I'm trying to get you to admit that you are really a socialist.
Well, I said libertarian socialism. That's not good enough.
That's good enough.
It's a long tradition. It's also called anarchist socialism, but the word anarchist is even more misunderstood than the word socialism. To a lot of people, it means you want chaos and no government at all. But
that's what the mainstream media is conditioning you to believe. Yeah.
So libertarian I like because it's minimal government is what it means, and socialism is a critique of capitalism. You got to go right to the heart of it and change the driving factor of those institutions. And libertarian socialism together makes people go, huh? So then you get a chance to explain instead of them just making assumptions.
Let's talk some more about social advance. We're getting too far afield here.
Okay.
Citizen empowerment, emergent economics, responsive democracy, universal respect. Our primary tactics would include informing and educating the public with an affiliated online news and information service, educating and training people to be active participants in civic life. That's a job. Endorsing candidates for office and ballot measures which advance our goals, and we talk about your goals later on here. Persuading public officials to make decisions in line with our goals. And board of directors, you've got you and Randy Prince now. He replaced Chris McAllister and Charles Dunaway. How many other members?
There's 3.
You're ambitious, aren't you?
And other people that help out by donating money or spreading our show around social media. This year is the year we're going to try to build up our membership.
Okay.
2017, I just came up with these ideas, and then a friend, I put them in a website and asked friends to comment. And a particular friend, Chris McAllister, who you just mentioned, helped me refine the ideas. We talked about it a lot. And then another friend had introduced me to some other people that are interested in what I was doing. So there's about 6 of us got together and formed a constitution and got it off the ground. Then this last year we started our news show. Been going on for a whole year. And this year we want to try to build up the membership.
How's the news show going?
We're gradually building an audience, and I think the quality of our production is gradually improving, and I think it'll get even better this next year. It's a learning curve, but we're getting there.
Okay.
The name of the show is Oregon News and Views, and you can find it on social media, on Facebook, YouTube, other places, Twitter. Look for the name Social Advance, the name of our organization.
Okay. You're making progress. Yeah.
So we're advancing.
Yeah. Citizen empowerment, emergent economics, universal respect, responsive democracy. You want to say a few words about any of those?
All I can say about the 4 quickly is that active citizens is a way to take power back from big government and big corporations where they're not really responding to our needs. The only way to take that power back is to stop waiting for somebody else to give it to you and to step forward and become more attentive, more educated, more involved to the extent you're able to. So that's the way to do that. The second one is emergent economics. Emergent simply means that we're all searching for a way to get beyond this system based on profits and get to an economic system that actually serves the needs of people. Not in love with that phrase. Our membership is definitely towards the left in various ways.
Yes, of course.
But we're working on a better term for that. We're kind of debating whether socialism should be something specific in there or not, because it kind of means different things to different people. And then responsive government, we need to change our election system, like I was talking about earlier, so that the voters are getting what they want rather than the wealthy. Donors to parties and candidates are getting what they want. And finally, universal respect, it's simply a principle, not only what we want to see in the world, but what we want to practice as an organization, as a people within the organization, is to treat each other well.
All right.
It's got to start close to home before you can move it to the bigger stage.
I'm interested in the historical background, the reason you started Social Advance, the rise of big business.
Mm-hmm.
You want to say something about the rise of big business, and then we'll go the rise of big government?
Oh, gee, that's a long historical story to go into, but yeah, you know, the rise of the changeover from feudalism to capitalism was a big change, and then people started to talk about, well, what is this change? What does it mean? Coined a term for it, capitalism. How is it different than what we knew before? How does it work? And some people saw there were problems with it. There's an increase of poverty, even though there's greater wealth and more material goods produced.
Yeah.
Some people had very miserable lives working in factories for 10 hours a day or losing limbs, or children working in factories.
Yeah.
Some people had no jobs at all. They were driven off their land, so they had no way of supporting themselves. So people are asking, well, why are these problems happening at a point where we're able to produce so much more food, more goods? And those who saw something at the heart of the system as problematic called themselves socialists. They wanted a system that was more socially harmonious. Instead of being conflict between classes, everybody would be in this together, moving towards a better future. And then, of course, Marx offered a theoretical framework that was very persuasive to a lot of people and gave some unity to the movement. And that joined in with the workers' movement and led to socialist parties and all the rest. And we're here now where there's different ways to approach this. Essentially what it boils down to is either you want to preserve capitalists in some kind of pure form, thinking that would work well, despite history, or you want to maintain capitalism in some way, but kind of regulate it and take some of the money away from the rich and use it for social programs to help people. That's more the New Deal, Franklin Roosevelt, and even it seems Bernie Sanders approach to it. And then there's those who say, well, no, we need to get to the heart of it and somehow change our institutions that are driving this process without letting go of the opportunity to use technology to better our lives.
Well, it seems like we're moving backwards, moving back towards what the European systems are doing successfully nowadays.
Well, the European systems,
some sort of socialism with some sort of capitalist parts.
There's crises all over the world, all through Europe right now. It's the same kind of things happening here are happening there. There's a lot of conflict over which direction to go because the economy keeps changing. I mean, that's the nature of a capitalist economy, is it's not stable. It keeps changing. So when people want to go back to a stable period, it broke up not because bad guys got in charge of the government, but because the economy changed. We changed from primarily national economy to an international global economy, and that kind of broke down the systems for regulating it. So we need to think about how we can move beyond that paradigm of trying to use national government to somehow regulate capitalism, because it's outgrown those boundaries, and you can't harness it. You can't bring it back in and stick it in a bottle as the president wants to do. I don't think that works.
Well, some of these systems in Europe, I don't think we can rightfully, accurately call them capitalist systems, because there are so many socialistic ideas. And so there's socialism with some flavor or some parts that are capitalistic in it. But I don't think, some of them, I can't think of any ones right now, where they're so far the socialist ideas and they're practicing socialism, and the capitalist ideas are in the background, a framework, so to speak. Well, they're more socialistic than capitalism.
Yeah, the foundation is capitalist, because you still have economic institutions, businesses that are run for profit of investors. There's some inroads into that. That's what socialists and democratic socialist movements were trying to do, is gradually reform capitalism until you got to the point where you could change the nature of business so that workers were in charge rather than investors. But they created social welfare programs, free education, healthcare, good healthcare, regulating. But every European country has encountered the same kind of problems we did here, that it got so far, but then because the businesses are still run for a profit, they try to break free of those restrictions, and they push back. They're driven into a corner, they push back politically, And also, it becomes a little inefficient when you're trying to create, when it's run by the need for profit, but you're taking away profits to pay for programs. There's a conflict there. It's possible to have business institutions that are not run to create profits. They could be simply run so that people have meaningful work to do that is a benefit to others.
A few moments ago you said for a profit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, where do the greed heads go with that? Not for a profit, it's for profit at the expense of social responsibility.
Right. But it's institutional because you invest your money, they look for our highest return. So nobody feels responsible. The investor says, well, I've given it to my fund manager. My fund manager says, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to help them increase their wealth. And then the executive in charge of the business says, well, they expect me to increase the profit. So it's all part of this.
You're talking about capitalism as it's practiced in America.
Well, it's practiced that way other places. It's just there's
not to the extent that you're implying right now.
The United States is an outlier in some ways, but Europe, they're still going under those same conflicts. They had socialist governments in the 50s, 60s, 70s in England, France, Spain, other places, but they ran into a wall there too, and they had to back up a little bit. So they had the same kind of conflicts. And just look at England, for example. Tony Blair was our Clinton. He tried to move away from those kind of, progressive ideas, I guess you would say, democratic socialist ideas. Cut the taxes, cut the welfare programs, have free trade with other countries. All those types of things were happening in other countries as well. So it was a worldwide thing. It wasn't just the United States. And they're also having the problems with the immigrants and the right-wing parties, just like we are here. Mm-hmm. So you see it happening in Europe as well.
So it seems like we're not getting any closer to solving the problems going on right now.
Hard to tell.
Capitalism and socialism. So I'm wondering, let's go to nowadays, what's going on in our election process here?
Well, let me give you one caveat first, though. I'm giving you my opinions about these things.
Of course.
Some of these are not necessarily shared by everybody in the group.
Yes.
But to one extent or another, I think we're on the same page in a general sense, that we need change and, this kind of direction we want to go in. So you're going to ask me what? I don't know where we're at.
In
the political scene.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. The political, the Democratic Party versus the Trumpsters, and I don't say the Republican Party because it isn't. It's been hijacked by the Trumpsters.
Well, you had both parties who were behind before 2016 or so.
Yeah.
Both parties behind free trade. Both parties were okay with cutting taxes for the rich. So there's a lot of similarities. Scaling back welfare programs, they were okay with that.
But to what extent these things you're talking about?
Well, it's more or less. But
we're having the same fun argument here.
Both parties were behind these things, but the public was not.
And why wasn't the public?
Because they weren't being benefited. They could see free trade was eroding their jobs, especially in manufacturing. So they were looking for someone who was promising some kind of change, and I think that's why we have such dramatic challenges to the status quo as Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders. They are shaking up the status quo of those two established parties, which were not responding to the public very well. Pressures were building up because people were not doing well, and so they're looking for somebody who's willing to do something different, even if that different is so different it may be scary.
So which of the candidates in the Democratic Party are going to challenge Trump successfully in 2020?
Yeah, that's hard to say. Things are so much in flux right now. I would love to see Bernie Sanders win the primary and then win the general election. So I'm trying to fix my sights on that being a reality and wait to see what happens.
Well, isn't his adventure in Syria now with this assassination to take the people's minds away from
that could well be
discovering his crookedness and how evil he really is for his entire life? And then you hold in suspense the trial in the Senate because that's just secondary because we're at war now.
People were predicting that he would go to war or, at least start some kind of conflict to take people's attention away.
He's got a few more tricks up his sleeves too. He's his whole life of having tricks up his sleeves.
Yeah, it's hard to tell how much of his how much of this is strategy and how much of this is just stumbling around. He's really hard to get into his psyche. Not sure I'd want to, actually. But
You studied some psychology,
yes,
didn't you?
yes. Yeah.
Does he have a personality disorder?
Well, you could make a case for that. They wrote a whole book about that, actually.
There's a lot of real good professionals who have written books about
Yeah.
what a sick human being he is.
Yeah,
The bad seed.
I think right now I've lost any of the Trump supporters as far as joining the organization. Maybe not, because I'm talking about, he was presenting an answer to real problems, even though his answer was, in my opinion, not a good one. But he talked about how the trade deal was not helping working people in this country. We were losing
He
jobs.
talked about it, but he didn't do anything about it.
But other people were not talking about it. Hillary wasn't talking about it. Hillary Clinton. She was not giving an answer to that question. When he says, here's an answer. Immigrants are taking your jobs. Other countries are taking your jobs because too much free trade, too open borders. He at least has an answer. Now, who knows why people buy that? It's a plausible story in some ways, but if you look into it, I don't think it's true.
Goebbels.
But you got to have an answer for people.
Think about Hermann Goebbels or whatever in Germany.
The big
Hitler's
lie.
Germany, yeah.
Yeah.
Propaganda.
Yeah, but he's addressing a problem that people are feeling, and the Democratic establishment at that point had no answer. Their answer seemed to be more free trade and training for jobs that, you're an unemployed factory worker, you're going to become a computer programmer. I mean, plus automation is just getting rid of jobs too. They didn't have answers for these things. And I think that's why Bernie Sanders hit a chord, because just like Trump, he was speaking about those things. He said, we have a trade problem. We need to renegotiate these to have more protections for workers and more protections for the environment. There's healthcare costs.
Speaking about things and doing something about them are two different things.
Yeah, well, he's got to win first, right?
How about Elizabeth Warren?
I like Elizabeth. I like her ideas at this point. I think I'd go with Bernie just because he seems, I like that he is challenging the way things have traditionally been done in the party. He's not, she's kind of following in his footsteps in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Picking up issues that he's pioneered, and the whole going to small donors rather than big money. She's following what he already started doing a long time ago. So I like the way he tries to stay ahead of the curve. And I also think that, I don't know, I hate to say it, but you wonder whether people are ready for a woman president.
Yes. Time goes by and things do change, huh?
Yeah, I hope so. I think she'd be a good president.
Yeah, I think she
I'd be happy if she won.
But the Trumpsters would rebel, and we'd have to call out the militia.
Yeah, I hope it's not a close election, because then there'll be cries of cheating and all that.
Well, if somehow he manages to win the election in 2020, or if he loses the election in 2020, his supporters will stage a rebellion, another revolt.
They say they will. Who knows? I mean, sometimes people say things and don't follow through. It's really hard to predict. We're really in flux, in my opinion. Nobody can predict what's going to happen, despite the pages and pages you see in the newspapers and the talking on TV. Nobody knows what's going to happen.
All right, let's see. We've covered practically everything that we... Oh, the rise of big government, the current situation. Because our current situation is so different, we need to go beyond the previous social compromise and address the fundamental nature of institutions which make profit-seeking their overriding goal.
Yes.
And that's the problem. Profit-seeking, the overriding goal. We need new institutions and a culture that prioritize caring for the planet and each other, and a policy program that does not simply call for a return to a past which cannot be recovered. It seems like this is the direction we're heading in.
Well, let me tell you, the two key parts to a national program, if I had any say in it, the two things that I would think are most important to do is, number one, you would abolish the for-profit shareholder corporations. Corporations could raise money through bonds and lending, because once you've paid back the principal, they no longer get anything more, whereas with a private for-profit corporation, you have limited liability, but potentially unlimited profits. So number one, change those so workers are in charge of the businesses and not people who invest. They would be controlled by the people who work in them. That's number one. Number two, that's maybe long-term. I hope more short-term. I'd love to live to see it, but that's
Our days are numbered.
The second one is the universal basic income, because I think that just eliminates the need for a lot of different social welfare programs. Give everybody a basic income. They can use it for the things they think are important: child care, education, whatever they need.
We're going to have to stop talking because they're going to yell at me in the control room. And you're supposed to look at that camera and give one final message, where this is your camera over here,
Okay.
to the viewers about whatever we talked about or anything else about social advance.
Okay.
You have a minute or so to talk to the viewers.
I can do that briefly. If you're interested in some of the ideas I've expressed here, go to our website at socialadvance.org. You can read more there. You can also contact us through a form. Get on our email list or look for our Oregon News and Views program on social media. That's pretty much what I wanted to say.
Thank you so much for coming
It's
aboard
good to
again.
talk to you again,
It's
Don.
been a while,
It's fun.
but we had fun. Yeah. And you see, your memory's really good. You were watching the previous program to be prepared for some of the answers that you gave me, but your memory's pretty good anyhow. We'll see you next time in the next couple, 3 years.
We're not on voice right now.
No, we're okay. Thanks for watching. Remember KFC and not Kentucky Fried Chicken. Dr. Don's KFC. Kind, friendly, and charitable.
Those are good.
Be kind, be friendly, and be charitable to you too. And you. And you.